Today we are interviewing Sanjay Rath, Pandit Sanjay Rath, a great astrologer from India, and I'm Komilla Sutton. I'm a Vedic astrologer working internationally, and we are holding the British Association of Vedic Astrology Conference. So Sanjay ji, could you please tell us something about yourself, about why you went into Jyotish and the tradition of Jyotish as you see it?
Traditions of Jyotish, there are many traditions of Jyotish in India. And I come basically from the east, which is Odisha, and this is a very ancient tradition that we have, largely because we were insulated from the rest of the country during the invasions of different Muslim invasions and all that. And we have been able to retain our studies and the cultures and very deep studies like the Germany Sutras and all that. So our tradition definitely is very ancient. We can trace it at least for 400, 500 years now. And we have retained most of the practices, including the spiritual practices. And that is the strength of the tradition. It's not just about Jyotish being a way of predicting the future, it's about a way of life and a spiritual way of life. And so when we compare ourselves to the other traditions, like the other traditions of Kerala, where which is also a very good tradition, then there is the tradition of in the Bangalore, Dr. Raman's tradition. So there are good traditions in India.
But your personal Guruji was your great-grandfather.
See, we have a guru who gives us the mantras, and then the one who teaches us Jyotish. Normally you have to learn with somebody who's immediately above you. So obviously it was my father's oldest brother who was the practicing astrologer in the family. There will always be one person who is a practicing astrologer. So he was the practicing astrologer. My grandfather by then was very old. So he did initiate me, but the main teachings I got was from Pandit Rath.
Okay.
And I learned Jyotish, and initially you have the job to calculate the charts. And that's very interesting because there's a lot of geometry there and calculations there, and you feel good that you know so much of math. And gradually learn slowly. It's about natural learning, if I can use the word. It's not like classes. It's more like you see something, you ask a question, and then you learn. It's more like a discussion that's happening over an elongated period of time.
And of course, what happened for you was that you not only got the information from your uncle, you got the hundreds of years or maybe thousands of years of tradition that passed on. And your journey in Jyotish is very interesting because you started off as a IAS officer high up in the government, and you gave up everything to become follow the path of Jyotish.
That was a difficult decision, but I did take it. What happened was India by itself, if you remember those days, everybody said that India has to modernize, and the whole concept of modernizing was to let go of your traditions and your values and everything that was really Indian, our culture. And at some point, some of us didn't like that. Our main objection was, while we can modernize, we should not just throw everything out of the window. So somewhere deep inside, it was like, I always had the thought that I have to do something about this. And finally, when my Gurudev, that is my Pandit Rath, he passed in '96. It is then when I woke up to the fact that it's now up to me to do something about it, or it's over with me. So that's when I stepped up.
And I remember that the first time you came to England was 2001, and we were struck by the star quality you had and the brilliance of your teaching. And I'd really like for you to explain your teaching, because what I'm very much taken by is your Gemini Scholar program and the Parashar Scholar program, where you are teaching the roots of the tradition. You're not just teaching what you feel, but the roots of first the Gemini system and then the Parashari system.
You think about it. I started at the age of 9, and by the time I really felt I was in some place or I understood that subject to a depth, a decent depth, it was almost like 37, 36, 37. So you can say that there's 20 years behind me of hard and learning directly one-to-one with the teacher. Somewhere then when you start teaching a subject like that, most people think that Parashara or Gemini, one of these classic books, if you just read it, You can do it in about what? In 6 months, in a year's time. But the biggest problem with that sort of a learning is like reading the Bhagavad Gita in what? 15 days? Honestly, can any of us really learn the Bhagavad Gita in a lifetime? So when we know that the real depth of a subject or a book like that is far more than what is superficially visible to us. Same way, when you have to teach something like the Jaimini Sutras, these are sutras. You have to imbibe them. They take time. So there are 4 adhyayas over there, and 4 chapters. And each chapter takes about 1 year to complete, a minimum of that. So that's why the Jaimini Scholar Program is there, where we do it in about 5 years' time we complete it. And even after that, the students still need a few years of practice to really become good in that. These sutras will take time to really absorb, and they are very encrypted, very detailed. You have tiny little things, and just a few words are there in a sutra. And each, for example, there can be one sutra on which I have given a lesson for almost 2 days. So that is the depth of the knowledge that is available. Most people would probably translate that one little line in 5 minutes and say, okay, this is what it means. That's so superficial.
Yeah. So sutra is a hymn, it's the traditional hymn, so it's just 2 lines or something. But this is the thing that what Pandit Sanjay Rath has done is that not only that they are in his for his students, there's this whole fund of knowledge available. The Jaimini Sutras also direct transmission from Sanjay to his students. So that means that when we think about that in a Vedic cultural way, it's not just Sanjay talking, it is his whole lineage and the information that is coming forward. And therefore what he says is, sometimes it's like the blessing of the Guru. You say something that is comes out, which is not something that is can be explained at that moment, that where did you get it from. And Sanjay has this talent, some third eye, that is what I would say, that is visible. And so I remember that when I was growing up, there was no tradition that you could go to a class and you could have this great teacher. It was all self-learning, and especially internationally. And now by the magic of internet and everything, that it is possible for students to have a serious good grounding in Jyotish. And you see, without good grounding, at least 12 years of studying. And in Taittiriya Upanishad, they say that you have to study it, imbibe it, follow the path, and then finally teach it. They are the 4 steps to learning. And Sanjay has been following that tradition, and we are very appreciative of that. What is your perceived difference from West to East? Now, when we are in the West, usually astrology is taken as entertainment on television, and all the scholars will criticize it.
The root flaw with the Western, as they do it today, is that they have deviated from their tradition. It is they who have kicked their tradition. And that's why today they have nothing from their tradition. Actually, astrology as practice, when we talk of Western astrology, we're talking of basically Hellenistic, right? And that has a very deep tradition. And they used to have temples for the worship of the planets, just as we had temples.
They're still there in Greece.
Exactly.
But they're ruins now.
There are only ruins left, and they have even forgotten what those prayers are. The whole thing is, the whole concept that, okay, there is karma, and that means they had remedies in the West. And all the remedies are forgotten. Whereas we in the East have our remedies. Secondly, we don't deviate from our traditional books. If you see the books that I am teaching are written by what? Maharshi Parasara would be about 5,000 years old. And then Jaimini itself is the student of Vyasa, which is about at the beginning of Kali Yuga, 3100 BC. We are still teaching those books. I am not teaching a single word which is outside of the classical books. And when I say classical, it is really ancient classical. I do not even, other books, anything from the 80s, I always consider as a reference book. It is not as a textbook. Whether it is Jatak Parijata or even Varamira, I do not consider Varamira as a text. I consider him as a reference.
Yeah, that I think that is the strength of Jyotish, is that we follow the tradition.
Totally.
When you meet scholars from India, or even now the scholars that are international, they will always quote that this is Parashara or this is Jaimini Sutra. So the tradition is unbroken, and I think one of the reasons that we could have an unbroken tradition was that a lot of the original Vedic teaching was oral.
That's right.
So our gurus taught us, and their gurus taught us. Whereas when you start writing in books, you see sometimes that the key or the flavor is lost. So what I was saying right at the early, that when Sanjay is talking, he's not talking just himself. He's talking the whole tradition, which you can recognize 500 years old, but maybe there's much deeper tradition than that, because that is how we feel, that once we connect our gurus, their gurus, and right up to Ved Vyasa, so that tradition is very important. And I think that the final word we would just like to ask you is, Sanjay, that what about the importance of upaya or remedial measures as far as Jyotish is concerned?
That is the backbone of Jyotish. It is like saying, why is Western astrology regarded as entertainment? You go to somebody, let us say he is able to identify your problem. Like you have a marriage problem, or there is a relationship issue, or a job problem, you cannot stay in a job. Whatever is the problem, you have identified the problem, you have identified the star positions that create the problem. Then what? The important question is, then what? And they tell them, okay, goodbye, have a nice day. Why did I waste my time coming to you? You go to a doctor. Imagine you went to a doctor and the doctor identified, oh, I see that you have very severe fever. Okay, now you can go home. How would you feel? Won't you feel miserable? You expect a medicine.
The people who are doing research in ancient Western astrology, they find the remedies are there, but because the lineage has broken in a way, a lot of the people who are studying now, that is not part of it, because whereas in Jyotish, the remedies is part of it.
We are lucky that we have had teachers who have preserved it, and I have preserved it. My students continue. Will continue in the future. Their lineage continues. It's the grace of the teachers and the basic attitude to the ancient tradition. The attitude has to be right. What the Western astrology can do is they need to go and find the books from where the source. Unless you go to the source, you can't find anything. They really need to go back to the source. They need to research the source. They need to start respecting the tradition. Unless they have respect for tradition, I don't think they will get it. Jyotish is a very ancient and a very beautiful subject. The point here is, all of us may have the good fortune or may not have the good fortune of meeting a good Jyotishi, a Vedic astrologer, as it is translated. Actually, for me, Jyotishi means somebody who's enlightened. A Vedic astrologer is a very twisted English word for a Jyotishi. It's not really Vedic astrologer. He's not an astrologer. He is looking into your past life. The astrologer cannot do that. So he's a very enlightened person. And if you can have such a meeting with an enlightened person, I suggest that you make the best of the time and the opportunity. Learn something, take a blessing, which will change your life. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool.